abide by the Taiwan agreement. That's where we are. And we made it clear that I don't think he should be doing anything other than abiding by the agreement.
Amid simmering tensions between China and Taiwan, US President Joe Biden speaks to Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Biden says the two leaders agreed to abide by the Taiwan agreement. And friction between Beijing and Taipei has hit a new high. The Taiwan defense minister says Taiwan fears a Chinese invasion by 2025 and describes the tensions as the worst in 4 decades. EU leaders are holding tough discussions on Europe's place in the world at a summit as they seek unity on how to deal with superpowers China and the United States. Russia reports a record high number of daily coronavirus deaths as the country struggles with infection rates. Some regions beyond Moscow cautiously bring back pandemic restrictions. Germany's Benjamin List and David Macmillan from the US win the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their development of a precise new tool for molecular construction. And let's start in Manchester, where British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has just wrapped up the Conservative Party conference. His speech comes at a potentially difficult time for the government. We've seen disruption recently to food and fuel supplies. There are concerns about the rising cost of living. Boris Johnson's speech was short on new policy, but it was long on his philosophical views on the future of the British economy and the post-pandemic recovery. He did announce that the government has a £640 billion Build Back Better programme, but we knew that already. He spoke about immigration, Boris Johnson saying that the UK government is looking to fix a broken model going back decades. He says low-wage mass immigration is not the way to solve issues like the energy crisis, the petrol crisis and some of the problems we're seeing in the UK supply chain. He says the economy needs to transition to a model with higher pay and higher standards. He was received like a rock star in the room, but some of his ideas were controversial. It remains to be seen how well they will go down with the wider country. Let's have a little listen into some of what Boris Johnson had to say.
It's thanks to the vaccine rollout that we now have the most open economy and the fastest growth in the G7. We have unemployment. We have unemployment 2 million lower than forecast. We have demand surging. And I'm pleased to say that after years of stagnation, more than a decade, wages are going up faster than before the pandemic began. And that matters deeply because we are embarking now on a change of direction that has been long overdue in the UK economy. We're not going back to the same old broken model with low wages, low growth, low skills and low productivity, all of it enabled and assisted by uncontrolled immigration. And the answer to the present stresses and strains, which are mainly a function of growth and economic revival, is not to reach for that same old lever of uncontrolled immigration, to keep wages low. The answer is to control immigration, to allow people of talent to come to this country, but not to use immigration as an excuse for failure to invest in people, in skills, and in the equipment, the facilities, the machinery. Or in the machinery, the facilities they need to do their jobs. The truck stops, to pick an example entirely at random, with basic facilities where you don't have to urinate in the bushes. And that is the direction in which this country is going now, towards a high-wage, high-skill, high productivity, and yes, thereby a low-tax economy. That is what the people of this country need and deserve.
We didn't necessarily expect to hear the Prime Minister talking about urinating in the bushes during his speech. We did expect to hear a lot of that setting out of the Boris Johnson idea about the future of the UK economy. Now, a lot of the mood around Boris Johnson's speech has been boosterist. It's been optimistic in Manchester, but whether that is something that resonates with the UK economy very much remains to be seen as the weeks ahead pass by. If energy prices continue to spike, if petrol is still an issue, if there are food supply problems in the run-up to Christmas, how will that message resonate with the British public? Boris Johnson spoke about climate change in the upcoming COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. That is just weeks away. He says the UK needs the help of the rest of the world to make it a success. Next to Facebook, and the global outage of the company's social media apps then saw a damaging testimony from a former employee on how the company chooses, she says, profit over safety. So the troubles are escalating for Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg. The CEO has broken his silence on some of those recent allegations. He's put forth a strong defense in a note to Facebook staffers. Zuckerberg says claims made by the former employee in the United States, Frances Haugen, did not make any sense. He says the argument that Facebook deliberately pushes content that makes people angry, all for profit, is illogical. Zuckerberg also pushed back against Haugen's claim on a 2018 newsfeed change that allegedly encourages the sharing of more divisive content. He said it was done to encourage the sharing of more content between friends and family, despite Facebook knowing it would lead to decreased engagement. And Zuckerberg tried to clarify on Instagram's negative effects on teens, according to the whistleblower. He says the company will continue its research and prioritise building what is safe and good for children. On Tuesday, a Senate committee convened a public hearing with Facebook's whistleblower Frances Haugen. The focus of that hearing was the safety of children, and broader concerns also including toxic algorithm amplification.
I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy.
Explosive testimony from a former Facebook employee turned whistleblower. Frances Haugen, a former product manager on Facebook's civic misinformation team, told a congressional committee on Tuesday that Facebook knowingly amplifies divisive and harmful content, choosing profit over safety, and that Facebook has sought to keep its operations confidential amid mounting scrutiny, especially in regards to its effects on children.
Congressional action is needed. Today, no regulator has a menu of solutions for how to fix Facebook because Facebook didn't want them to know enough about what's causing the problems.
Lawmakers in both parties pounced.
Its only real principle is profit.
Mark Zuckerberg's going sailing and saying no apologies.
Accusing CEO and founder Mark Zuckerberg of pushing for higher profits, while being cavalier about user safety. And they demanded that regulators investigate whistleblower accusations that the social media company harms children and stokes divisions.
Our children are the ones who are victims. Teens today, looking at themselves in the mirror, feel doubt and insecurity. Mark Zuckerberg ought to be looking at himself in the mirror.
In the end, the buck stops with Mark. There is no one currently holding Mark accountable but himself.
Haugen said Facebook had also done too little to prevent its site from being used by people planning violence, saying its focus on metrics trumped ethical concerns. Facebook was used by people planning mass killings in Myanmar and the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of then-President Donald Trump, who was determined to toss out the 2020 election results.
Facebook can change, but is clearly not going to do so on its own. My fear is that without action, divisive and extremist behaviors we see today are only the beginning. What we saw in Myanmar and are now seeing in Ethiopia are only the opening chapters of a story so terrifying, no one wants to read the end of it.
Haugen says Facebook has the tools to de-emphasize divisive content, but chooses not to use it to keep engagement high.
Facebook knows that content that elicits an extreme reaction from you is more likely to get a click, a comment, or reshare.
A Facebook spokeswoman disputed Haugen's knowledge of the company's inner workings, adding, quote, "We don't agree with her characterization of the many issues she testified about." The Senate hearing reflects the rising anger in Congress with Facebook amid numerous demands for legislative reforms, with senators warning that Facebook faces a reckoning akin to other industries like big tobacco.
Next, amid simmering tensions between China and Taiwan, US President Joe Biden spoke to Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. The two leaders, according to Biden, agreed to abide by the Taiwan Agreement. In the last week, Taiwan reported 148 incursions by Chinese warplanes into its airspace. That prompted Washington to urge Beijing to stop military aggression against Taiwan.
As tensions mount between China and Taiwan, US President Joe Biden has spoken on the phone to Chinese President Xi Jinping. Biden told reporters on Tuesday that both leaders had agreed to keep to the Taiwan Agreement, an apparent reference to Washington's policy of recognizing Beijing rather than Taipei, on the expectation that the future of Taiwan will be determined by peaceful means.
I've spoken with Xi about Taiwan. We agree we'll abide by the Taiwan Agreement. That's what we are. And we made it clear that I don't think he should be doing anything other than abiding by the agreement.
China claims Taiwan as its own territory and has not ruled out the possible use of force to achieve unification. The island, which broke away from the mainland in 1949, rejects Beijing's claims and has its own democratically elected government. Over a 4-day period beginning last Friday, Taiwan reported close to 150 Chinese Air Force aircraft entered its air defense zone. The show of force from Beijing has been condemned by Washington and Taipei. Taiwan's defense minister said on Wednesday China will be capable of mounting a full-scale invasion by 2025, adding that relations were at their worst level in more than 40 years.
要翻台的话，他目前有这能力，都有的，但要看怎么一个结局。所以我们不做任何挑衅但如果把他激怒了，就跟我们人一样，你把我激怒了，我手上能力我也会发挥出来。所以2025是我们研判要全面我们这样研判的。
Meanwhile, leaders from the European Union have been holding tough discussions as they look for unity on how to deal with China and the United States. At a summit on Tuesday, which continues on Wednesday, leaders of the EU gathered at the BRDO Castle in Slovenia. It was their first meeting since June, and issues such as how to grapple with the fallout from the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, a seething France after its quote-unquote betrayal by Australia, the UK and the US over nuclear submarines are on the agenda. The key meeting also comes on the eve of an EU Western Balkan summit in which countries to the bloc's east will seek assurances that they will one day be admitted to the European Union. To be clear, that is a continuation of the same summit. France is still seeing red over Australia's decision last month to cancel a French submarine deal worth tens of billions of dollars in favour of a US offer. After the US allegiance proved unreliable, according to France, Emmanuel Macron is pushing Europe to stand up for itself and says that it needs to keep working in good faith with America.
We had disagreements and we can put everything on the table. In this regard, we have convergence points with the USA, and we also might have differences. And it is important that Europe speaks with a voice that is its own voice.
Pressing for further clarification and re-engagement, Emmanuel Macron says he'll hold talks with President Joe Biden on the sidelines of the G20 in Italy this month.
We will see. I just believe in facts. I do hope, I do think it's feasible, I do think it's more productive for both of us. I will see. And I think we we're scheduled to discuss together mid-October. We will catch up during the G20. And I think it would be the right occasion to see how we can re-engage very concretely.
Ahead of the EU Leaders Summit in Slovenia, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Macron in Paris. The US State Department said in a statement that there was a common agreement between France and the US to deepen and strengthen coordination. A State Department official admitted there was a lot of hard work to be done. After over 4 hours of talks, European Council Chief Charles Michel said in a statement, "Drawing the lessons of recent crises, we are committed to consolidating our strengths and strengthening our resilience by reducing our critical dependencies." In order to become more assertive on the international stage as an economic and defensive power, Charles Michel feels Europe needs to enhance and rely more on its autonomy. But the European Council chief pressed how Europe was not abandoning its relationship with America altogether. He went on to say, "We are committed to working with our allies and like-minded partners, in particular the US and within NATO, which is the cornerstone of our security." Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, has for many years been seen as one of, if not the, dominant EU leaders. But amid ongoing talks in Berlin to come up with a government that will replace hers after recent elections, leaders like Emmanuel Macron, Italy's Mario Draghi and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte are seeking to make their mark. The collapse in Afghanistan and the submarine fallout have given them fresh impetus to push Europe to develop a separate military capability. With France leading that charge, the summit in Slovenia continues. Meanwhile, bilateral cooperation between France and the UK could be at risk. The issue is a long-standing dispute between the two countries over fishing rights in the self-governing Jersey island near the coast of northwest France. France is building pressure, calling for the EU to get tougher on the UK. In the aftermath of Brexit, tensions between London and Paris have been escalating. As part of a post-Brexit access deal, Britain has refused to grant some fishing licences sought by French boats. That's left Paris furious and fishermen worried for their livelihoods. Paris says it could, in response, cut the power supply to the British Crown dependencies of the Channel Islands. European Affairs Minister for France Clément Beaune told reporters the country will not stand for this. Beaune appeared to hint at a punitive measure, suggesting France could end up snapping the energy supplies. Earlier, French Fisheries Minister Annick Girardin issued a similar threat that the fishing row could have an impact on the power supply by undersea cable from France to Jersey. The Channel Islands of Jersey and Guernsey are just off France's northwest coast, and France supplies them with electricity. They are self-governing territories, but they depend on Britain for their defence and on France for their energy.
Nous sommes au bout de la patience. Les pêcheurs le sont, légitimement, vous l'êtes et nous le sommes. Donc on continue ce combat, un très mauvais jeu, un anti-jeu, pour le dire ainsi, britannique. Bon. Nous avons été patients, nous avons obtenu des résultats, heureusement, sur un certain nombre de zones de pêche et de licences, mais on est loin du compte.
Earlier in the week, French Prime Minister Jean Castex told Parliament that bilateral cooperation between France and Britain was at risk. He asked the EU Commission to take a tougher stance against London to ensure Britain complies with commitments under the terms of its accord on the British exit from the European Union.
La Grande-Bretagne ne respecte pas la signature qu'elle a elle-même donnée. De mois en mois, en effet, et je vous assure que mon gouvernement, et notamment la ministre de la Mer, ainsi que le secrétaire d'État en charge des affaires européennes, suit ce dossier avec toute la précaution qu'il nécessite. De mois en mois, le Royaume-Uni présente de nouvelles conditions d'exigibilité, refuse certaines données sans aucune argumentation et reporte l'octroi de licences définitives qu'il doit pouvoir délivrer.
Fishing rights for EU boats in UK waters were a stumbling block in negotiations over a post-Brexit trade accord between London and Brussels. The dispute's already flared up back in May when a flotilla of around 50 French trawlers massed in front of the Saint-Hélier harbour on Jersey. That sparked a standoff that even drew in French and British military vessels. Since then, French fishermen have applied for new access licences. They complain of unnecessary paperwork and a requirement to prove they had fished in British and Jersey waters before Brexit. That is said to be not an easy task, especially for some of these smaller boats. Britain said last week it would grant just 12 out of 47 applications for new licences for small EU boats. Jersey issued 64 full and 31 temporary licences, but refused 75 applications. French European Affairs Minister Beaune has emphasised that France's patience is running out. Beaune says, "We've negotiated calmly and nicely for 9 months now. That's enough." They, he says, that is the UK, think they can live all by themselves and lash out at Europe. The UK denies that that is what is playing out. There are some demands on other thorny post-Brexit discussions, such as migrants seeking to cross the Channel, though. Paris is furious with London over its role in the AUKUS security pact as well. Despite the risk of getting stranded in Europe or even dying along the way, scores of people from a town in Iraq's Kurdish region are opting to be smuggled into the European Union. Shiladze is a town of some 40,000 people. It's become one of the major points of departure for migrants. Local smugglers and officials say the outflow of migrants has spiked and many are being sent via Belarus. Migrants there believe it could offer a safe and fast way out.
Hundreds of people have been smuggled from this Iraqi Kurdish town into the European Union via Belarus in the past 5 months, locals say, despite the risks of getting stranded or worse. This man is a smuggler in Shiladze. He didn't want us to show his face. He's arranged the trip for about 200 people, he says, first legally by plane to the Belarusian capital Minsk, then illegally overland. His partner in Europe is a man he met in Turkey. Business took off for him and other smugglers in late spring, when the Belarus route opened up, he says.
There is a man who lost 2 or 3 people on the way. When this happens, you get very upset. But this is about their livelihood and destiny. What can they do? They want to leave, and it's better for them.
Poland, Lithuania and the EU have accused Belarus of encouraging illegal migrants through its borders, since Brussels slapped sanctions on Minsk over human rights abuses. Most are from Iraq or Afghanistan, and Shiladze is a key point of departure, according to smugglers and residents. Autonomous Iraqi Kurdistan is relatively stable compared to the rest of Iraq, but residents grapple with low employment and pay, as well as geopolitical tensions that affect this border region, namely Turkish military sorties against Iraq-based Kurdish militants, the PKK, based in the area. Halkaft Mohammed has a 19-year-old son who reached Germany last month. He'd go too, but it costs about $12,000. People are selling homes and cars.
We've no other choice. We're worried for our youth, our villages are besieged, and we're afraid. Right now I've no money, or I'd go with all my children. The Turks hit from one side, the PKK from the other. They control our villages.
Ibrahim Mahmoud Ibrahim is a Peshmerga, or local security officer. It's a steady job, but it only brings in $400 a month, and he'd like to marry and raise a family. It has become a prison here, he says. He might go too. An Iraqi migrant died last month after crossing into Poland from Belarus, one of a number of recent deaths in the border area, coinciding with the surge in illegal migration. Belarus, a former Soviet republic, is one of the rare destinations for which Iraqis can easily get tourist visas, though Baghdad stopped direct flights in August under pressure from Brussels.
Just one more story to come today. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much indeed for watching. As ever, I'm Ollie Barrett. Fashion is often used as a scene for protests. We've seen it all around the world, and we'll leave you with, as I say, a similar story from the latest Louis Vuitton fashion show in Paris. Thanks very much for watching.
This is right, Arab.